Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video here at Tablemon, and today we're going to be talking about the three different decks that in my opinion have the best chance at succeeding in this Charizard infested metagame, where Charizard is the S tier deck and we are all trying to either play it or beat it reliably. Now, beat it reliably is a very strong word. If there was something that reliably beat it most of the time, it would be seeing a lot more success, but I do think there's three very specific decks that certainly have a good chance. Starting off with Giratina V-Star. Giratina V-Star is a very powerful deck, as from the previous format. Yes, it lost Path to a Peak, so it can no longer disrupt Charizard very effectively. However, it does have a lot of assets and good points going for it in this brand new post-rotation format, where it can still stand up to Charizard. First off, a Beast Seeking can be a pretty safe option to help in your setup, help build your Lost Zone, and combining that with continuous use of Colress Experiment, you can very easily and quickly activate your Mirage Gate and get to the Star Requiem. Now, Giratina V-Star with its 280 HP is completely safe in play if it doesn't have any prior damage before you take 3 prizes. Once you take 3 prizes, Giratina V-Star can be KO'd through the use of Defiance Band if you're ahead, or through the use of Choice Belt, which is common in the Tord build of Charizard. But before you do that, you can safely evolve and keep them on your bench at no risk of getting KO'd. There's always a possibility of a Radiant Charizard KO as well, so you do have to keep that in mind. It does require those tools as well that can be achieved a little bit earlier than the 3 prize condition, but it's not super common, and it's a big investment for the Charizard player. Now, Star Requiem is one of the best tools to deal with a Charizard EX. It immediately one-KOs the Pokemon, and Mist Energy isn't too common just yet. It did win, a Charizard with Mist Energy did win the latest regional in Sao Paulo, but even if they have Mist Energy, this deck still plays at least 1 copy of Temple of Sinnoh, and if necessary and Mist Energy becomes more common, you can definitely go back to playing 2. Now, you play Grass Energy naturally in order to cover for the attack cost of Giratina V-Star, and that means you get to play Iron Leaves as well, which is a great answer and another option you have to 1KO and deal with a Charizard EX. And now, on top of all of this, your other attacking options, which include Greninja, if you're playing the Water Energies, which I do recommend, and Sableye, forces Charizard to protect with Manaphy early on and with Jirachi late game. And as we saw from Orlando Regionals, some lists are not even playing Jirachi and are taking that risk, or if they're playing the Mist Energy, they assume that's enough and they're not playing the protection against Sableye. So that is a small weakness, a small insight that you can try to exploit in order to get an easier late game. Now, every game you play will be different. Navigating the matchup is not super straightforward. The early game definitely settles a lot of things, but with your ghosting effects in Counter Catcher, Prime Catcher, and Boss's Orders, you should be trying to go for like a 2-2-2 price trade-off in an ideal world if possible, where you go Lost Impact, a Pidgeot, and then you go V-Star, Star Requiem, a Charizard EX, and then you finish the next one with Iron Leaves, or you're able to find an option to get 2 prize cards through the use of Cramorant, Greninja, and Sableye at some points of the game. Many times it's recommended to not be aggressive with Giratina and let the Charizard player get a little bit ahead, but sometimes starting with a Cramorant pressure can be good. So just something to keep in mind. Now, I don't think this is none of these decks should be a surprise to anyone if you've already been involved in competitive, but in case you aren't, this is why I am doing this overview. Now, the next deck is Chen-Pao Excalibur. Now, this deck requires a lot of setup to get going. You do need to establish a stage 2. You need the backup B-Barrel in order to get a lot of resources in your hand to continue finding the cards you need. But once you do, Chen-Pao becomes this unstoppable force, and it's one of the few Pokemon that can reliably 1KO Charizard continually, right? Back to back turns, you can not easily, but you can reliably 1KO Charizard. Requires 2 energies from your ability Shiver Chill, plus 1 superior energy retrieval, which is not a big stretch for this deck. It's what it's designed to do. And you also have alternative ways to take 2 prizes by using Iron Hands early on, or the combo of Prime Catcher plus Canceling Cologne plus Greninja. So you have all these options to help you with advancing your win condition. You don't always have to 1-KO a Charizard in order to get ahead and get a 2-prize turn. So it's important to keep these options in mind. And then with a double B-Barrel that you're going to be trying to set up each and every game, you actually get a lot of really good protection from the Charizard deck's late game disruption, which includes constant barrage of Iono and also Roxanne. Sometimes, no matter what they do, you're completely protected, and that's really, really great. So double B-Barrel a priority, not only against Charizard, but against pretty much all decks, making you immune to that Iono disruption, which a lot of decks rely on to potentially beat you. So very important to keep that in mind. And then another good thing going for Chen-Pao Excalibur is that Maximum Belt is not a very common inclusion in Charizard decks right now. That does mean that Charizard can't really take 2 prizes first unless you have a very slow setup. So that's always going to be good for you, because if you end up taking the first 2 prizes, you're going to have a very big advantage, and it's going to be on Charizard decks to try to use Radiant Charizard in order to stop you from getting ahead, right? But if they do that and knock out your only Chen-Pao in play, and you can return KO the Charizard with something like a Excalibur or your Radiant Greninja, as long as you don't have a 2-prizer in play, they can't take 2 prizes. So what they try to do to offset the price trade doesn't really work, and you're still in the favored position as long as you have that B-Barrel, so you don't fall to an Iono to 1 or a Roxanne to 2 cards. So Chen-Pao, one of the more straightforward decks for sure in the metagame. That's not to say it's easy to pilot, but it's one of the most like raw, like in terms of powerful, it's one of the most like it has the most raw strength is what I want to say. Yeah, but of course the high cost of setting it up can sometimes make it falter, and so far it's done decently at all of these events, but it hasn't been able to overcome the Charizard and take a win for itself. And then the last deck that I wanted to talk about is Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX was one of the decks that lost the most out of rotation, which of course is not ideal. However, it's still a very powerful deck and still keeps the main asset, which is a powerful single price attacker in Drifloon that can 1-KO a Charizard. It's one of the few decks that can boast something like this. Drifloon does require either the Luxurious or the Hero Cape in order to get this 1-KO onto the Charizard, but it is definitely possible. It is worthwhile for sure, and Drifloon is a very powerful Pokemon now. So far, Charizard decks are only playing 1 copy of Lost Vacuum, which does allow them to go Lost Vacuum, your Drifloon goes down after it took down a Charizard, and you have to promote something, and they can ghost your Gardevoir EX, which is of course not ideal as they get a 3-price turn, but they can't do this twice, which is really good. And if you're able to use Drifloon again, you might be able to overturn a 2-price deficit anyways, which is really, really nice. Now, this deck can also snipe Pidgeot easily because it plays 3 counter catchers, which is very, very important to have. Those 3 counter catchers, you're always or almost always gonna fall down in the prizes. Therefore, the counter catchers should be activated for most of the game, and you can systematically, right, because you also play for Iono, you can take down their Pidgeot, then take down their B-Barrel, and that leaves them very vulnerable to Iono to the point where they might not have the boss to chase down your Gardevoir EX at the very end of the game. Now, this is easier said than done, of course. This does require a lot of setup, but the deck plays 2 very key Pokemon that can help slow things down to Gardevoir space whilst it gets set up and gets all those energies into a discard pile. The first one being Klefki, which you can promote in the active, and that shuts down Rotom and shuts down Luminion, which are 2 very key pieces for Charizard decks. And also you have Mimikyu, which with its ability renders pretty much the whole deck useless, especially in the beginning when Radiant Charizard is not a threat, and the Charmanders and Charmeleons are only dealing 30 or 50 damage respectively. And to top that off, Mimikyu can attack in this deck, so you can actually, if they try to use Charmanders, you can knock down you can knock out multiple Charmanders, and you even have the tools to increase your Mimikyu's HP and make it an even bigger threat. So Mimikyu is not to be underestimated, especially if Charizard decks stop playing ways to recycle their boss's orders or don't play enough ways to ghost around the Mimikyu. A single Mimikyu could potentially take them down if played well and carefully, so they need to be very aware of that. And then finally, the multiple Kirlia help you protect from late game disruption. Not only do they discard cards helping you thin your deck, but also they give you extra resources for when you're searching for that last piece to potentially close out and finish a game. So these are the 3 decks that I think are very powerful and can stand up to Charizard in the current metagame. They have their own weaknesses themselves, right? All 3 are pretty weak to Ancient Box. So we have this sort of like rock, paper, scissors going on where Charizard defeats Ancient Box defeats the Charizard counters, and then the Charizard counters try to keep up with Charizard itself. There's other viable decks, of course, but to me, these are the main 5 decks in the format. Charizard at the very top, and then Ancient Box and Giratina, Chen-Pao and Gardevoir fighting for their place right behind Charizard and trying to overcome and be successful in this metagame. So that's my opinion. What do you think? Have you had any success with a different deck against Charizard? Like I said, there's definitely outliers and other viable decks in the format, but to me, these are the main 5 that if I were testing and playing in Indianapolis Regionals this upcoming weekend, these would be the 5 decks that I would try to really focus on and make sure no matter what you're playing, I have a good understanding of how they work and what to do against them. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know if you're enjoying these more sort of explainer videos instead of just playing on PTCG Live, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.